A man logged onto a forum in the early 2000s. It's not mainstream, and not a place anyone stumbles into by accident. It's a quiet corner of the internet where people argue about physics, paradoxes, and ideas most of the world doesn't take seriously. He doesn't use a real name at first, just a handle, time travel _0. Later, he signs off with something else, John Titor. He said he's a soldier from the year 2036, sent back on a government mission, not to change history, just to retrieve a computer, an old one, a 1975 IBM 5100. And that's when things get strange. Welcome back to Time Slipped. I'm your host, Nikki Rich. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed. Today, we're opening one of the most famous cases in the Time Anomaly archives, John Titor, and the future he said was waiting for us. Let's open the file. Most people think the John Titor story begins in the year 2000. Well, surprise, it doesn't. The earliest appearance dates back to July 29th, 1998, when someone sent 2 faxes to Art Bell, host of Coast to Coast AM. At the time, Art Bell was a popular radio personality, and effectively, the gravitational center for fringe ideas. We're talking whistleblowers, conspiracy theorists, government insiders, people claiming to be angels, aliens, or time travelers. Now, back to the faxes. The writer explains that he had to fax after hearing other callers claiming to be time travelers from the year 2500 and beyond, and wanted to correct the record. Because according to him, they were describing a future that didn't exist. According to Titor, when you go back in time, you travel along your original world line. You don't overwrite it. And when you shut the machine off, a new one is then created, a new world, a new universe. The fax doesn't describe what it feels like to time travel. It talks about orbital mechanics, about compensating for the Earth's rotation so you don't reappear in an empty space, or worse, inside solid matter. It mentions small discrepancies between world lines, different car models, books released late or not at all, a skyscraper missing near a favorite store in New York. Small errors, the kind you'd notice if you weren't trying to impress anyone. Then, abruptly, the future ends. The writer claims that anyone traveling forward from the year 2036 hits a hard stop in the year 2564. Nothing exists there. No light, no matter, just blackness. Time doesn't continue. And according to him, that's why time travelers are now going backward, trying to find where the line went bad. His conclusion is quiet, almost resigned. It appears the line went bad around the year 2000, which is why he's here. Not to save the world, but to test a theory. A second fax follows later that year, and this one is calmer, more personal. The writer says he's been on this world line longer than usual, that he's grown attached to the people here. He warns about Y2K, about power failures, about systems collapsing, not all at once, but quietly. And then he promises something strange, that once Art Bell confirms receipt, he'll send photographs, pages from the operations manual of his time machine, and whether those materials ever existed is unclear. What is clear, though, is this. By the time someone logs onto a forum in the year 2000 and calls himself Time Travel 0, the architecture of the story is already there. Fast forward to November 2nd, 2000. On something called the Time Travel Institute forums, a niche message board dedicated to theoretical time travel, physics, and speculation. And there, a new user appears with a military insignia, a strange confidence, and the username time travel underscore 0. The early posts are short, technical, almost boring. One lays out 6 components required to build a working time machine, which is a strange thing to give away for free. He described a system built around containment, control, and timing. Magnets, sensors, atomic clocks, and computers working together to hold reality in place long enough to step out of it. He said it was installed in a 1967 Corvette. Later posts mention a 4-wheel drive truck, which doesn't help his credibility. It feels like one of those details that either betrays the fiction or reflects revision over time. Or maybe someone just wanted to upgrade the DeLorean. Who knows? And whether it's the technical detail or the sheer strangeness of it, the post is scroll-stopping. And then the questions pile up. Not reactions, questions, clarifications, follow-ups. The discussion grows so large, it has to be split into a second thread. And he answers calmly. He doesn't argue. He doesn't escalate. He explains. Early on, he mentioned something that should derail the entire conversation, but somehow doesn't. He says he's already been in the year 2000 for months, that this isn't a quick visit. When someone asks how it's possible for 2 versions of him to exist at once, he answers casually. In fact, the me on this world line is upstairs asleep. He's 2, he says. No follow-up, just a statement, offered with the same tone you'd use to explain where you left your keys. Then, in January of 2001, something shifts. Time Travel 0 refers to himself by name for the first time, John Titor. Around the same time, he begins posting on Art Bell Post-to-Post BBS, a text-based bulletin board system run by Art Bell. And it's here that John Titor lays out the identity he'll be remembered for. He claims to be an American military time traveler from the year 2036, based in Tampa, Florida, assigned to a government time travel project. His mission? Travel back to 1975 and retrieve a specific machine, the IBM 5100. The IBM 5100 was needed in the year 2036 to debug something called legacy systems. This is almost certainly a reference to what's known as the year 2038 problem. Here's the simple explanation of what that means. A lot of computer systems keep track of time using something called Unix time. Instead of calendars and dates, Unix time just counts seconds, starting from January 1st, 1970. Think of it like a digital odometer, an old-fashioned one. It can only count up to a certain number of miles, or in this case seconds, before it runs out of digits. When it hits the maximum number it can display, it just starts over, at 0. The system keeps running, but the number it's using to track time suddenly becomes wrong. And that's the problem. Early programmers weren't designing for the year 2038. They were designing for the next few decades. They were working with limited memory, limited storage, and very real hardware constraints. So time was stored as a number, and that number was only allowed to get so big. And here's the part we've always known was coming. In 2038, that number hits its limit. And when it does, time itself stops making sense. Systems that rely on accurate timestamps, banking, power grids, transportation, infrastructure, can begin to fail. Not all at once, but quietly. and cascading errors that spread faster than anyone can trace. Titor claimed that in his future, this problem wasn't fixed in time, that patches came too late, that too many systems were too old, that modern technology collapsed under the weight of its own shortcuts. So now, back to the IBM. It wasn't impressive by modern standards, but it occupied a strange middle ground. Part portable computer, part mainframe translator. It could speak the language of older systems fluently enough to debug them, a quiet capability that was not publicly documented in the 1970s. IBM engineers knew about it. The public did not. By the year 2000, this feature still wasn't common knowledge. It wasn't something you'd casually find online. It lived in internal documentation, engineering circles, and institutional memory. And yet, John Titor knew about it. So, if he was headed to 1975, what was he doing in the year 2000? Well, unofficially, he said he was here to visit family, to recover photographs lost in the future Civil War, and to warn anyone who would listen. He talked often about his family, about missing them, about knowing what was coming, and that detail always gives me pause, because it's either very good writing or very human behavior. He warned about civil unrest in the United States. According to him, civil conflict would begin around 2005, sparked by disputes over order and rights following the 2004 election, marked by a Waco-type event every month. And by that, he meant repeated violent standoffs between citizens and the government, increasingly normalized. By 2008, he claimed the country would be in full civil war. The US would fracture into 5 regions, divided by ideology and military objectives. And then, in 2015, it would end in a brief but catastrophic World War III. And if you're listening to this in the 2020s, you already know the problem. The timeline didn't line up. At least, not cleanly. When challenged, Titor leaned on physics, specifically the Everett-Wheeler many worlds interpretation. The idea that every possible outcome creates a branching universe. Time travel doesn't change history, it creates divergence, a new world line, which means his predictions, they aren't wrong. They're just from somewhere else. It's an elegant loophole, isn't it? And possibly the most time travel appropriate one imaginable. But then, without ceremony, John Titor vanished. His final post appeared in March of 2001. There was no goodbye, no final warning, no explanation. The account simply stopped responding. He didn't return to clarify timelines. He didn't defend himself. He just never showed up again. What lived on weren't new messages, but archived ones. Collected, reposted, sometimes rearranged. The story didn't continue. It fossilized. And that silence did more work than any prediction ever could. Then, in 2009, a private investigation suggested the entire affair was a hoax. The name most often cited is Larry Haber, a Florida entertainment lawyer. Why him? Well, because a John Titor Foundation appeared in 2003, and Haber was listed as the CEO. His brothers, John Rick Haber and Maury Haber, worked in computers and IT, and no one admits responsibility. The Habers deny it. The name John Titor was even trademarked and later abandoned, which to me makes this feel more like an elaborate hoax than anything else. Why trademark a time traveler? And why abandon it? Let's say John Titor wasn't a hoax. Or at least, not entirely. Instead, maybe he was a voice bleeding through from a nearby alternate world. A future that didn't happen here, but almost did. He didn't start by predicting the future. He started by explaining why some futures were impossible. He spoke like someone describing a place he'd already been. The predictions only appear later, and only after people insisted on asking what came next. And that's important because this isn't the part people remember. They remember his warnings about civil unrest, about government losing control, about wars that weren't fought overseas, but at home in the United States. They remember the dates, the timelines, the futures that were supposed to arrive and didn't. But what holds the story together isn't what comes next, it's what's already here. A record that didn't announce itself, a story that seeped instead of exploded, a voice that sounded less like a prophet and more like someone thinking out loud. Someone answering questions, clarifying assumptions, explaining mechanics. And now that voice has a name, and a mission, and a machine. So here's the lesson. Don't trust forums. Or maybe do. Just bring an IBM 5100 and a radiation badge. You never know what might be useful. That's it for this episode of Time Slipped. Remember to subscribe and check us out on YouTube. Thanks for listening. I'm Nikki Rich, and we'll see you next time.